Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. I got an email from Tom, and he's been updating me along the way about the progress of some bills in Michigan. And what we're talking about right now is Michigan specific, but it does, I think it relates to people in other states as well. It's something you should probably be thinking about if you have an interest in or own a military vehicle. So if you're a car guy, you know what I'm talking about. And I've mentioned before, I used to own a deuce and a half, an M35A2 military truck, 3 axles. The thing was gigantic. I wrote articles about it. I think I did an entire video on it. I'll put a link to some of that below, and I'll put a picture of the truck right there. And it was a big vehicle. And I apologize, I don't own it now. I feel kind of bad about that. I sold it to a guy because I was moving and I wasn't going to have the space for it. And it took up a lot of space. And so one of these days I might get another one, but right now I don't have one. But I have an affinity for military vehicles. I didn't do any time in the military, but I know people who did. My father was in the military. My grandfather was in the military. A lot of my uncles were in the military. And I'm also a historian. So I've studied World War II in particular, but a lot of the military history as well. And so military vehicles have always fascinated me. I've been to the Tank Museum in England. I've been to the RAF Museum also in England. And whenever I see these vehicles, I always look at them. I'm fascinated by them. And there's something cool about something that's built to military standards and just seeing how different that is from civilian standards. And you understand that if you've ever ridden in the back of an M35. I talked to guys who spent time in the military who told me one or two things. Either they loved the eighth, the M35 Deuce and a half, or they hated it. And it depends on how much time you spent in the back and where you were traveling and how long you're traveling. So, but anyways, the email I got from Tom says, this is calling on all members to support our fellow Michigan members, referring to the Military Vehicle Preservation Association. And that's a group I used to belong to. I don't think I belong to it anymore. My membership lapsed a while back just because I don't have one anymore. But there are some bills now being pushed through Lansing, which is our state capital. The Transportation Committee passed the bills 8-1, which means that they passed overwhelmingly. Now, two groups did oppose the bills, and it was the Secretary of State's office and the Sierra Club. Now, we don't know exactly what their opposition was, but the bills that are being pushed right now would allow for full road use and historic use of military vehicles. And this is the thing, and this is what actually kind of baffles me. My Deuce and a half was a big, big truck, but it was simply a truck. And so when I got it, I did some research first. I'm an attorney and I do a lot of research. And I looked into whether or not I could drive a Deuce and a half on the road. And I looked around and it looked to me like I could. And I had people ask me, they said, Steve, are you sure you can drive that thing legally? Like, do you need like a chauffeur's license or some kind of CDL or something? It's a big, big truck. And it turns out that, as far as I could tell at the time, no, as long as you just got it and insured it, you could register it and plate it, which is what I did. Now, the truck I got was a 1969, and I believe at the time I got it, it was old enough to where I could have said it was a historic vehicle, get antique plates for it. But I didn't want to do that because in Michigan and many states, if you're going to drive a vehicle with those kind of plates on it, you're supposed to only drive it to and from shows and things of that nature. And I wanted to just drive it around for the fun of it. I enjoyed driving that vehicle. I took it up north a couple times, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, drove it around on logging roads, and I ran stuff over with it. Never harming anything, simply having fun with it. But there are people out there who say, well, I'd like to get one of these vehicles. And so there've been apparently recently there have been some pushback on people who want to register military vehicles. And so the bills that are being promoted right now would allow for the full-on road use or historic use of military vehicles. The bills are now going to move to the Senate floor in Michigan for voting. And so they're asking everyone in Michigan who has an interest in this to contact your lawmakers through a link that's in the email and ask them to support the bill. And then you can then do this. So I'll put the link below because this is being put up by SEMA. And I think SEMA is a good organization. And so here's the points that they're trying to raise here that these bills would do. The Senate Bill 345 would amend the Michigan Vehicle Code and it would define military surplus and historic military surplus vehicles. So apparently right now there's kind of a gray area they fall into because they're not defined. Senate Bill 346 would exempt military surplus vehicles from certain emission inspections. Michigan does not have the really, really onerous inspections that other states have got. I spent time in California, and I've heard stories from back east about vehicles going through annual inspections and how difficult it is. Michigan does not have those kind of inspections. So this is not kind of like we're asking for a pass that everyone else has got to go through. That's not the situation. Senate Bill 344 would authorize registration and titling of military surplus vehicles that adhere with certain equipment standards. It would also allow the issuance of historic vehicle license plates to historic military surplus vehicles. So, like I said, I think some of those vehicles may have been eligible for that before, but again, it was a gray area. So I remember when I got the title to my vehicle and it was delivered to my house by a guy with a flatbed trailer, and I put it in my driveway, I took the title that was assigned to me, and I walked into the Secretary of State's office, and I just said I would like to transfer title to myself, and I would also like to register this vehicle. And the woman said, "Oh, okay." She looked at the vehicle and title and how much it weighed and looked it up, and I paid some money, and next thing I know, I walk out of the license plates. And I got license plates that were just simply pickup truck license plates. So it wasn't that complicated. Now, the funny thing is that I owned the vehicle for 4 or 5 years. And I drove it all over the place, and I would drive it in traffic. I drove it to my office a couple times. I lent it to a brother of mine who brought it to his work because they had a car show where they said, anybody here works here who has a cool car or can bring one in one afternoon, bring it in. We'll all go outside at lunch and check out the cars and eat lunch together, barbecue. And I had a couple different occasions where I was asked, would you like to have your truck in a parade? And I, on one occasion, had a bed full of Boy Scouts out back, sitting in the back as we drove very, very slowly through town on a 4th of July parade. Why not? And I remember one day mowing my lawn, and I turn around and look, and there's a sheriff's deputy car parked at the end of my driveway. And my first thought was, uh-oh. Shut the mower off, and I walk over, then the guy's standing there halfway up my driveway looking at my truck longingly. And I had the truck in my garage, parked across 2 parking spaces, and the doors were up because I'd got the lawnmower out. And so normally you couldn't see the truck very well because the doors were down and the truck was tucked in there. And the guy said, "Excuse me," he goes, "Is that your truck?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh my gosh." He goes, I was in the military. He goes, "It brings back memories." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "Can I look at it?" I said, "Sure, come on over." And so he walked inside the garage and opened the door up. Now, when I brought it inside the garage, I would often tip the windshield down and take the roof off because it had a cloth top. And I'd also take the diesel stack off. I had a short stack I could put on it. And I go, "No, but I tuck it in here and I'm not using it for periods of time because I don't want to have this monstrosity out in the driveway." And but I said, "But no, it runs and everything." And he said, "Oh, this is really cool. It brings back memories." And I'd repainted it 4-color camo and all that. And he goes, "Would you like to have this in a parade?" I said, "I'd love to. I'd love to. I would be proud to have this in a parade." And the guy said, "I think I can arrange for that to do that with a bunch of vets." And I said, I'm all for it. So it was fun to have the truck. But never once did anybody say, "Oh, by the way, you have the thing plated wrong." And I would have assumed that the sheriff's deputy, if he thought anything wrong with how it was plated, he would have said something because that was the tail end of the truck sticking out. And it had just a civilian plate on it. But no one said anything to me about it. So, like I said, it would authorize registration and titling explicitly of military surplus vehicles that adhere with certain equipment standards. It would also allow the issuance of historic vehicle license plates to historic military surplus vehicles. And if you ask yourself and say, "Steve, what was different about a 1969 AM General M35 A2 than, say, any other 1969 pickup truck?" And I'd say, "I don't know." I mean, obviously it didn't have airbags, but neither did a 1969 pickup truck. I'll tell you right now, it had a bumper. It had a bumper that would probably double as a piece of construction equipment, meaning that if you ran into something, all you do is hose it off and keep driving. I mean, that bumper, like the idea of 5-mile-an-hour bumpers or whatever, no. This thing would knock the wall over that you run into. Okay, it would. So everything on it was safe. Now it had a seat belt, but I think it was just a lap belt, and the dashboard was not cushioned. The dashboard was cast iron. Dashboard is similar to the front bumper. It may have been cut from the same block of pig iron. But as far as that goes, I mean, it wasn't anything different. Now, the question, of course, is what kind of exhaust emissions would it have had? It was a diesel, but they built diesel trucks in 1969, and I don't think that the engine in my M35 polluted a whole lot worse than any other 1969 diesel that was still on the road. But I guess that may have been the difference. But generally speaking, I'm also not going to be driving this thing on a daily basis. This thing was a nightmare to drive when it came to working the clutch. It had a 5-speed manual transmission and a 2-speed transfer case and unlocking front hubs. But the clutch was a nightmare. Just thinking about it right now makes my left calf and my left quad throb. Not in a good way. So I wouldn't be driving it very often. So I can't imagine that it hurts anybody to plate these things and drive them around as historic vehicles or even as civilian vehicles like I did. But these bills recognize the important historical and patriotic purpose of these vehicles. And that's the thing I'm getting at here, is that it's cool to see a piece of history rolling down the road. But the military vehicles are also things that bring back memories to guys who served and say, I spent time driving one of those. I spent time riding in one of those. And anybody will tell you, by the way, you might think Army tanks win wars. You might think airplanes win wars. But ask a general what wins wars, they'll tell you the trucks do. Okay? The trucks and the supply guys are actually, that's what feeds the front lines. And you can dig in up front and hold out for a little while. You need supplies. And so the trucks are just as important as the Army tanks are, as the jets are, as any other piece of military equipment out there. The trucks are just as important. So when the guys say, yeah, I get choked up looking at that truck, I believe them. Hey, I got choked up looking at it. These bills also acknowledge that military surplus vehicles are becoming valued collector's items among the automotive community. And that's true too. When I was looking to buy my M35 that I got it for less than $5,000. And I've priced them lately, and they've gone up in value. So the bills would bring the state in line with other states that are moving to allow former military vehicles similar accommodations as those available to civilian vehicles. And again, like I said, it's making it more explicit. We always want the laws to be clear as best we can so that you can go in knowing what you can and cannot do with something. So like I said, I did the research, and I'm an attorney, and I felt confident in my research, knowing at the time that I could get this thing plated as a civilian vehicle, and I did. And like I said, I had encounters with law enforcement officers. They never pulled me over or anything, but I'm sure that truck was seen by hundreds of police officers driving around, and I spoke to a few. And, I took it to Woodward Dream Cruise twice, so never had any problems with it. So again, legislation, which is Senate Bills 344, 345, 346, have been introduced in Michigan to allow for the titling and registration of military surplus and historic military surplus vehicles. Currently, such vehicles are not able to be titled or registered for use on highways in the state necessarily. Depends on the vehicle. So the bills were approved by the Senate Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and await consideration by the full Senate. That's where we are right now. This email was sent to me. I believe I got it yesterday. I'm talking about it today. The video goes up shortly, and I will put a link to all this information below. So if you are in Michigan and you find this topic of interest to yourself and you feel like you want to weigh in, please do so, because one of the things I'm relatively convinced of is that many laws get passed in Lansing and elsewhere by legislators who go, who cares? Does anybody care? And if they get buried in emails and letters and telegrams or whatever else you have, singing telegrams maybe, I don't know. Maybe they'll go, wait, it turns out there's a lot of interest in this. So, be civil. Let them know how you feel. This is one where you simply go, guys, there's these 3 bills in a package that are going to cross your desk. Want to let you know that I, as a voter, support this. And I'm watching this, and I find it very interesting. So there you go. Historic vehicles and legalities in the state of Michigan. And please check the link below. Otherwise, questions or comments? Talk to you later. Bye-bye.